Our next guest serves as the CEO for the National Association for the Education of Young Children, a global association advocating for high-quality early learning for all children. Please welcome Michelle Kang to the studio.
Thank you.
Oh.
It's so great to be here with you today.
I mean, this is going to be a great conversation. This is something that really interests me personally. So, your panel here this morning focused on building sustainable early childhood education. Let's start with the challenges. Talk to us about the current child care crisis and what's driving it.
Right. Well, first, it's important to name that while child care is at a crisis point now, it was at a crisis point before the pandemic. Some people have asked, well, is this because of the pandemic where we all had to go home and everything got upended? No, the sector was in crisis well before then. And it's primarily due to the challenges related to the low wages for the people who do this work. Those who are doing this work on average make between $12 and $13 an hour. They are doing brain architecture work in caring for young children. And yet we have not supported and value them in the work that they do. There is not enough care for working families. So parents who need and want to find high quality, affordable care can't find it because there are not enough people in the workforce doing the work. And what has happened now through the pandemic is that there is even greater a supply crisis because it is a staffing crisis. So today we want to shine the light on the necessity and the value of early childhood education, and for all of us collectively to champion what we know is needed, which is support for high quality early learning.
And where's the crisis most dire?
It is across the country, but I would say it's particularly acute in places where we call childcare deserts. And those are places where there is no care available for families. So if you are looking for care, there isn't a choice of care, let alone high quality care. So I would offer that those deserts have always existed, but there are many more of them now because those few providers who might have been in places where they were offering care have since closed or not been able to sustain their business because parents can't pay more, educators can't be paid less. And then what we have is a problem with supply where people aren't able to access any care possible.
I would imagine rural communities would be really underrepresented. Is that true?
Significantly, yes. And that's where we talk at NAEYC. We're a global organization of 60,000 members and 51 affiliates. We talk about how childcare is best done in a way that provides high quality learning that is accessible to families in the mode of delivery that best works for them. So that might mean it's a childcare center. It might mean it's a family childcare home. It might mean it's a Head Start program. It might mean it's a faith-based childcare. And recognizing that childcare and high quality childcare can happen in all of those settings. If there is a lack of any of those available for families, then we have a true challenge in being able to support parents being able to participate in the workforce. And I have to just name that on this International Women's Day, it is particularly impactful to women and women being able to advance in their work. So I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that, but also that it disproportionately impacts BIPOC women who are predominantly those who have been doing the work and holding up this industry based on their low wages.
You spend so much time talking to parents and educators. What are the most compelling stories that you've heard, or even heartbreaking stories that have been told to you?
Yeah, well, I couldn't miss the opportunity coming to Austin to visit a local childcare program in Austin. So just down the street is Open Door Preschool, and they are a wonderful program that has been in existence for almost 50 years. They're the first accredited program by NAEYC in Austin. And I had a chance to talk with the director and meet with the educators who were doing the work there. So I want to highlight some of the things that they shared, which is that they're passionate about the work. I met this teacher, Ken, who has been there for 30 years.
Wow.
He's been there so long that I met in another classroom a teacher who had been cared for by him in the program. And that is astounding and it's unusual, but it also speaks to the kind of people who are doing this work, who see the meaning of it and believe in it and want to be part of this. And the program director there, who has supported him in being a professional, done what she can to address supporting him with benefits, providing him a great work environment, doing everything she can to address wages that are on the low end. But in her program, she has prioritized raising wages so that they're paid $15 an hour instead of $13 an hour. But even despite that, she has to fundraise for 25% of her operating budget. And that story is not one that is just open door. It is preschools and programs and childcare programs all across the country. When you mention parents, I'm a working mother, and I've had the benefit of high quality care for my children when they were young. They're much older now. When I talk to other working mothers, they are plagued by this as a challenge. These stories of, if you are about to have a baby, put your name on a wait list before you tell your employer, because you might not otherwise get care. It speaks to this challenge that has happened for decades and continues, and has unfortunately only gotten worse. So there are things that we need to do. We need a substantial, sustainable investment in this to prioritize early learning, just like we do K-12 learning. But we're working and inching our way towards what we hope one day will be early learning for all.
I remember asking my employer for permission to get pregnant because I was so scared that I would have to plan ahead, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to figure out how I could re-enter the workforce.
Right.
Explain how the childcare crisis impacts everyone and why both it's a short and long-term problem.
Right. Well, all of us know someone who is impacted by childcare. So if you're a worker, you probably know someone like yourself when you were thinking about having a family, thinking about what that means in terms of your work. First, how you might leave to have a child, but then how you might be able to come back. And that coming back in particular is impactful for those who are around you in a workplace, because if you're not able to find care, you're not going to come back.
You can't bring a baby with you.
No, and there are stories, right? I'm sure some of us have known those times when someone brought a baby to the workplace because you had a childcare breakdown, and that happens. It happens. It's happened for years, and it continues to happen. It is happening more, but is highly disruptive for a workplace and for those around us. So it impacts us in the workplace. It also impacts people being able to participate in the economy, because they might want to work, but they can't, or the cost of care is so expensive that once they have one child, they're in some places paying more than college tuition. They have the second, and it becomes a financial calculator of, can I even afford to participate? So not having care be so expensive makes it difficult for people to participate. So then employers aren't able to bring talent to their teams because childcare has impacted them. And we're hearing that more. We're at a stage now where employers are actually voicing this is a problem that is costing them. There's a report lately that showed that the loss of infant toddler care and the supply challenges is now costing us $122 billion. So the real dollars, and that is nearly doubled from what the study showed a few years ago. It's becoming a costly problem to us, in addition to being an impact problem for those of us who are working parents, for those who are in the workplace, but those who also just want great environments for our children to grow. I'd be remiss if I didn't share that we need to remember that 90% of the brain development happens between the ages of 0 and 5. 90%. So all those interactions for play, that where they're learning and absorbing the world, making those connections, are the foundations for learning the kind of skills that we want for our children in K-12 and in the workforce and beyond to have. And it all happens in those early years, and we can make no better investment than to have early care available for all young families.
It shouldn't have to be a trade-off.
It should not, no.
The pandemic greatly exacerbated the crisis. We heard that many children who were supposed to enter pre-K never did. Mm-hmm. Are we seeing any glimmers of improvement over the past year in this country? Have we bounced back, and where?
Yeah, well, I think importantly first is that we are naming and doing something about this. It's not just about literacy loss, it's also about the loss in the interactions that give us those skill building around social emotional and well-being, and being able to learn how to interact with peers, with adults. We lost that time through the pandemic. And by not having that, we're having to try to figure out how we catch up to those lost years, but also address continuing to grow on and build on that. What I would say is it's important, and where I feel that there is some hope is where we are talking about it and addressing it and saying this is a challenge and we need to work together with families and with educators and with policymakers to invest in putting additional supports in place where we know that those supports are needed. It will be far more impactful to do early interventions or to address that learning loss now than to wait when it becomes even more significant of a challenge. I think early educators are well equipped to do this. They have been doing this. And one other place that I'm very excited to just hear again continued conversation is that we recognize that by investing in, especially places that are investing in the pre-K ages and those early years, that we're seeing those positive outcomes in terms of them being able to enter kindergarten, ready and equipped to be successful.
So your panel talked about innovations and bettering our current systems. Can you give us some of the highlights and what's resonated with you?
Yeah, it's a great panel, and I enjoyed very much talking with my fellow panelists about first naming that what we really want is a significant, substantial federal investment to be able to have early learning and early education available for all. In the absence of that, we have to make progress where we can and can't wait because we don't know when that moment will come. So we have to look for those little wins wherever possible. We talked a little bit about some of those places where we've heard about communities and policymakers recognizing that wage supplements, especially with the federal investments that happen through the American Rescue Plan and the CARES Act, enabled providers to be able to keep their doors open, but also give bonuses and provide supports to educators, professional development, then in ways that they couldn't before because they didn't have the funding, and to help them keep their doors open for families even though their enrollment went down. And another highlight we talked about is that employers are seeing this as something that they need to put their weight into. And while employer-sponsored childcare is not something new, it has been around. It impacts a very small segment of the population in terms of who can benefit. And employers are recognizing that it goes beyond potentially building and having an on-site childcare center. They can put money into subsidies for local programs to lift up their quality, to help them support wages and compensation. They can, have spaces and family childcare programs in small centers and larger centers and impact the community's availability of high quality care. And so that's encouraging, and especially on the heels of the announcement last week where the government is asking employers who are doing CHIP investment to associate it with also thinking about the supply of childcare. It's not a perfect solution, but it is an exciting solution in terms of being able to say we can continue to make positive movement and change.
Okay. I elect you governor. What policies would you pursue on day one? For instance, federal relief from the American Rescue Plan is set to expire in 2024. Yes. For how long and how much should it be extended, or do you think it should?
We need continued dollars in early learning however we can get it. So if it comes through additional extensions of means that have been invested, like the American Rescue Plan, we need that, because otherwise we know from our surveys that 78% of providers have said that they may be forced to no longer be available and close their doors in providing care because they can't sustain the cost of providing care any longer. So I would look to continuing to invest those dollars into my state. I would look to meaningfully implement wage increases for early learning educators. I would look to find ways that we could support them in being businesses. Many people who operate early learning programs are small business owners. They're women, they're BIPOC women, they are small business owners. And I would look for ways that we could help them operate these needed businesses that are doing brain development every day.
I feel like I would vote for you.
Oh, thank you.
So what states or countries are the best practice role models when it comes to early childhood education?
Well, I am excited. First, there are many global countries that have decided that early learning is something that needs to be invested in from the very beginning. So I would look to some of those countries that have made those investments and made it a requirement of just how they are supporting young families to continue doing so. But on the state side, there's some exciting things happening, with different states making movement in different ways. DC did a wage supplement for workers in early childhood. From talking with some DC early educators, that has made a meaningful difference in their daily lives because of that additional wage supplement, that they either don't have to do a second job or they can continue to do their job meaningfully. Exciting work happening in New Mexico with the voters saying that they wanted to invest in and have early education funded at a state level. And so we're excited about what's going to happen there. And that is a great story for how parents and advocates and policymakers work together for years before that happened. This is not a one and done. It is a story that goes over a decade back with those conversations. And so that's very encouraging for those of us who look at other states and say, okay, where else could something like this happen? It might not happen exactly that way, like it has happened in New Mexico with the land grant, but it's encouraging to know that those voices can come together. And overwhelmingly, early learning on the ballot received a majority of votes, which shows that this is not a partisan issue. People do not believe that early learning is something that is a left or a right issue. It is an issue that impacts all of us and should matter to all of us.
I mean, a decade, that's a super long conversation. How do you influence policymakers? How do we make this happen sooner than 10 years down the line?
Yeah. Well, at NAEYC, one of the things that we are so proud of is making sure that wherever there are conversations about early learning policy and practice, that educators are at the table. I think my favorite part of my role is being able to meet those educators and to hear their stories, to find out what made them go into this work. Why do they do this? What's hard about it? What do they wish that policymakers could hear? Yesterday, Cynthia, the director of the program, explained to me that she just wishes people would see that what they're doing is education.
Yeah.
That it is development of young children. It is education that starts at infancy and goes through age 5. And she wishes that people would understand, and she wishes people would come see. And we need people like Cynthia and like Winifred, another educator I spoke with recently, to be at the table and to be invited to the table, because they will share with you what can be impactful and what works in their communities. And having a diversity of those voices, whether they're center educators, whether they're leaders, whether they're advocates, whether they're small family childcare providers, we need all their voices. And so I implore, whenever someone's saying, well, how can we fix this? What can we do? That the best answer is to make sure that your table includes those people who are doing the work every day. They'll tell you how it works, and they'll tell you it doesn't, and then they'll tell you some stories about what it's like in their programs. So do
you have any advice for parents who are looking for childcare and options are difficult? I mean, you're a mother.
Yes.
So what's an approach that they can take?
Well, they can add their voice to advocating that we need to have more support for early learning, but that doesn't solve their immediate problem, especially if they're looking for quality care. I would say it's important to look and ask those questions about ratios in their programs, about the support for early educators. NAEYC's accreditation standards is a great place to look for as a guide. There's 10 standards that talk about what we look for that is developmentally appropriate practice, interactions between children and educators, family partnerships, communications, support for educators in the program. Those standards are ones that ground in what is the neuroscience of what's good for young children. And that can be a guide for people who are looking for what is quality in programs. But then one step beyond that is to look around and talk to people and ask, fellow moms and others who have had to access care, what did they find when they were looking for care, and to learn from each other, but then again use our collective voices to advocate for more quality care, because certainly what they're going to likely find is there's just not enough care. And I hope for those who are looking for care that they can find one when they need it.
Lean into the community, create the community.
Yes.
All right, Michelle, thank you for stopping by the studio today. And you can check out our daily schedule of interviews at the website schedule.sxsw SXSWEDU.com and watch all of our studio interviews on the South by Southwest EDU TV app or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SXSWEDU. I'm your host, Kari Byron. Thank you for watching.